and welcome to Wrecked to Redeemed, where we confront the complex realities of racism and faith. I am your girl, Kavana, and I help people to confront their ideas and beliefs about America, racism, and the Christian faith. Now, right now, our country is still in mourning of the death of George Floyd, along with Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and many more. Just recently, another life taken. Recently, found hanging in a tree. It is heartbreaking what our country, what our community, the Black community, is experiencing right now. And what didn't help were the words of Candace Owens. Yes. I know that it hurt you just as much as it hurt me, maybe even more than it hurt me. Of course, we're not surprised by what she said, but at the same time, the degree to where she pushed it was a new low for her, and nothing more or nothing less, I should say, than salt in the wound, in our wound that we have as a community. Salt, vinegar, rubber alcohol, the whole works was just doused into our wound with her thoughts, her words. I know that you can attest to this. It was a betrayal to our community, and a lot of people had different ideas as to whether or not to comment on these words that she spoke of, because it only brought attention to her. And a lot of people believe that she says what she says for attention, which very well could be the case. I think so. But I heard a perspective by Roland Martin from Roland Martin Unfiltered, and what he said was that evil cannot stand alone. And he wanted to continue to give rebuttals to her arguments. When people kept telling him, no, Roland, you just need to leave her alone, just don't pay her any mind. But he said that if her commentary is going to be out there on the internet for people to consume, then the opposing argument should be able to be seen as well. And so that's what I'm going to attempt to do today, is to address the evils of her words. But I'm not going to pick apart every single thing and say how it's incorrect or anything like that. I feel like there are many people online that are already doing that. Quite frankly, could be doing it way better than me. So, who could do it better than me. So, what I want to do here is to bring attention to something that I feel isn't being talked about enough, if at all. I personally haven't heard talked about it. Maybe you have. If you have, please tell me. But I believe that this needs to be addressed because you and I want to be a part of the solution here. You and I want to be able to do our anti-racist work, to work to dismantle these racist structures in our nation, in our society, between relationships. This is what we desire to do. And I know that that's your desire in your heart, because you wouldn't be here if it wasn't. So what I believe that, and not just what I believe, but what white people's job in anti-racist work is to use their white privilege to dismantle these structures, because they were built for white people, by white people. And so that is their job in that. But I believe that there is work to be done even in the Black community and other communities of color. And white people, if you all want, just know that this message is also for you, because it's great for you to be aware of what's happening within these communities due to white supremacy. So what I want to bring attention to is the subject of internalized racism. And I'm not any expert on this, but I did find a resource online called racialequitytools.org, and it is an amazing resource. Please go online and check that out. But for the topic of today, I'll be putting the link to the link about internalized racism in the description box for your pleasure. As we experience racism, as we're victimized by it, we end up internalizing it. In other words, we develop ideas, beliefs, attitudes, actions, and behaviors that support or collude with racism. And I want to read a few things about that. I have my little notes here. Anywho, so it says that internalized racism is a systemic oppression in reaction to racism. Just as there is a system in place that reinforces the power and expands the privilege of white people, there is a system in place that actively discourages and undermines the power of people and communities of color and mar us in our own oppression. Now, another point that this resource points out is that internalized racism in and of itself is not self-hate or low self-esteem. What this article, or not even article, but what this resource encourages us to understand about internalized racism is that it's structural. Just like how we described the systems, just like there's systems created for white people externally, there are systems internally that are going on. It's a structure of racism. And so that's another point that they want to convey in this resource, and that it negatively impacts communities of color interculturally and cross-culturally. Culturally. What are some examples of this? Man, I have a lot. Oh, snap. Actually, let me just back up a little bit. Another point that they want to make that I wanted to make sure that I said in this video was that internalized racism is a situation that occurs in a racist system when a racial group oppressed by racism supports the supremacy and dominance of the dominant group by maintaining or participating in a set of attitudes, behaviors, social structures, and ideologies that undergird the dominating group's power and privilege and limits the oppressed group's own advantages. Ooh, man. So, what are some symptoms or products of internalized racism? One obvious one, well, maybe not so much obvious, because I didn't really recognize it before, or at least I summed it up to just being low self-esteem, is when you feel stuck in the mud. We have beliefs about what our abilities are as Black people. I'm just going to use Black people for the sake of this conversation. I'm just going to use Black people, except for a few other examples that I have lined up. But as Black people, sometimes some of us have issues believing that we are capable of achieving more in this country because of our race, because of where we may have grown up. And you probably know these people. You probably have come across them. And usually what people would deduct that to being is just that they're lazy, right? That they just don't want to do better for themselves. And part of the reason why people are in this place is because they are literally stuck. They see the oppression not only around them, but also told to them, and what their worth is. They believe it, and so they literally cannot move. And this is one thing that makes a difference, or at least one thing that is important to understand about people who are by people who are immigrants, because immigrants will come to this country and they will thrive. Even if they're Black, they'll thrive. They may come from the continent of Africa, and they'll do so well here. And they're like, oh, why can't they do? And why can't they do? I mean, I'm, the thing too. Why can't they? And part of the reason, not the only reason, but part of the reason why they may be doing better is because the people in this situation literally have the structure built into them that has been just hammered into their psyche that they cannot advance in this life. And I think that the Black community has come a long way in this regard. We have just been encouraging one another in such a beautiful way. And we are seeing more and more graduates every single year. A lot of Black women. There are more Black women graduating from college now. And it's a beautiful thing to witness. And it's important to note that, but there are still people in our society and within our communities that are suffering from this. So that's one example. Another one is cross-cultural hostility. You can think Black people versus Latinos, and even within the Latino community, it's interesting because, actually no, I'm gonna hold up on that example. I'll say it in 2 seconds. Another could be Asians versus Black people, or Asians versus Latinos, or Blacks and Africans, vice versa. And if you are an African or African American, you know exactly what I mean. There'll be some comments like African booty scratcher and stuff like that that's been told. And I know that if you are if your family is from the continent of Africa, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When you come here as a child, that's what you experience, that's what you hear. And so it's like, oh no, we're not them. Us as Black people, we're not them. And honestly, on the continent, it's still like, no, we're not African American. We're not them. So it's that cross-cultural, like there's stigmas attached there. And so when it comes to Blacks versus Latinos, I want to read one example that a friend gave to me. I posted about this on my Facebook, and this is what she shared with me. I got her permission, so thank you, girl. But this was what she said. She said, my own Puerto Rican, Cuban, and Dominican family doing all they can to distance themselves from any African heritage or brownness of skin. It's sad and self-hatred. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I've learned long ago not to be. And it's interesting because with that experience that she shared with me, and also several others from other friends that I've talked to over the past couple of days, they've shared with me how within the Latino community, how there is, again, that stigma attached to being Black, and there is a favoritism, like they favor closeness to whiteness. The fairer that you are, the features that you have, the straighter your hair is, there's a favoring there. And so it is, that is a product of internalized racism. I mean, for people in the Caribbean who were colonized by Europeans, again, this is racism taking its root. This is white supremacy taking its root, that whiteness is better, so anything closest to, just like the slaves that were born from slave masters and the slave mother, you get closer to the house, you have better privileges because you are nearness to whiteness. And so that's interesting. And so another product of internalized racism is you have the desire to strive to meet white standards, whether that is for the way you dress, whatever it is. You are trying to meet the standard of being a well-mannered, well-dressed, well-spoken, well-kempt Negro. There was another one. I wrote it down. What was it? Non-threatening Negro as well. Can't be allowed Black person because you're scary. You got to take the bass out of your voice. Why? Because it's threatening. You can't dress a certain kind of way. Why? Because it's threatening. And it was interesting to me. Here's an example that I'm just remembering of a brother in the Lord. And if you see this, bro, I still love you. But this was still dead wrong. I told you it was dead wrong. I'm going to just say the example for it. But there was a situation where he went into church, and there was a brother in the back of the church, just like standing up in the corner. He had like a big coat on. He had big jeans on. They weren't like hanging off of him or anything like that, but his behind or anything, I don't think. But they were like big pants, Timbs. He had like a fitted on or something like that. And so to my friend who is also a Latino, I would just say that for the sake of the conversation, he's Latino, and he had a problem with how he looked. And he was like, yeah, we just mean mugging and this, that, and the third. And he's like, and he started commenting on the way that he dressed. And he said, I mean, you gotta, like you have to present yourself like you're not threatening. Like, why can't you just dress like me? And the way he's dressed is he was wearing a button up, slacks, nice sneaker / Oxford type shoes. And I said, but why does he have to dress like you? Why is it that you are just scared of him because of how he's dressed? Why does he have to change himself? And he was like, no. Like, it just, like, if you want for people to not be afraid of you, you can't dress like that. And I know that is, that's something that he has internalized for himself, that in order to be non-threatening or even just to be proper, you have to wear a button down and you have to wear slacks. So it is, they have set this standard. And so we strive to meet this standard because we want to be a good Negro, or we just want to be a good minority. And so that's another way that internalized racism has affected us. I'll give just a few more examples, and these ones will be specifically in the church because it needs to be talked about. And I know people have already been feeling this way, and so if you feel this way, I'm about to speak for y'all. I'm about to speak for us. And hi, Nikki. How you doing, baby? How you doing? Here's my son. He might want to join in. But it is in silencing the voice of our suffering in the church. And I don't know about you. You may or may not have experienced this, but are you okay? You want to sit with mommy? I'm losing my train of thought.
Hiccups.
Huh?
I got your hiccups.
You got the hiccups? Oh no, it's okay. It'll go away eventually. Oh, you got a bat. Okay. Just be careful with it, please. Okay, so yes, it's silencing our voice. We are told, at least I was told, time and time again, that it's not the right place. It's not the right time to talk about social justice issues. It's not the time to talk about race. We can't do that here. It's a worldly issue. It is, it only brings division. We need to focus on Jesus and the gospel alone. That's our only charge to do in the word. At least that's their assumption. But that's all that we're supposed to do here. So that's all that should matter. And what did that do to me? That told me that being a good Christian, being a godly, spiritually mature Christian, was to not focus on race, because race only divided us. Focusing on the carnal and not on the spiritual. And I've come in contact with several brothers who shared the same sentiment right now. I've had conversations. Oh, sorry, baby. I thought I was going to fix you. I kind of missed you. I see you, baby. So that's what I was told. I was told that I needed to put my blackness to the side. My blackness needed to be erased. And what's really interesting is that I've been told several times, and mostly I was told, you aren't black, you're Christian. And I was told that majority of the times I was told that was by a Latino. Majority of the time. You are not black, you are Latino. I mean, you are not black, you are Christian. And I can't tell you how many times I was almost accused of idolatry, or told that if I were to focus on my blackness, I would be committing idolatry. Mind you, I was told that by white people and Latinos, and it's interesting because they're very proud of their heritages. They're very proud of it. But me talking about my blackness is idolatrous. Black idolatry. If you talk about Black Lives Matter, oh, you're putting too much emphasis on it. You're talking about yourself. You're not talking about Jesus. So that even causes Black Christians, some Black Christians, not all, but some, to look at these incidences or look at these lynchings as a distraction. It's distracting away from the goal. It's distracting away from the gospel. It's distracting away from what's important. And what we need to do is stay in the word. What we need to do is stay prayerful. What we need to do is to be a good Christian, a proper Christian, and not bring up our race. We are told to deny ourselves. So we deny ourselves. And I think that was part of the reason why it was so easy for me to start adopting these racist ideals and beliefs. I mean, I started adopting them when I was very young. Just like the definition said, I just internalized it. Even if I was conflicted, even if I was confused, even if I, felt some kind of way, I just received it. And I didn't have a strong enough foundation to know to reject it, And so I look at these situations and it makes me sad because I look at us and I'm like, wow, we're sick. Wow, we are sick. We have been damaged. And I think and we pointed out these issues before in the form of hair love, loving our natural hair, loving the skin that we're in and not thinking that we're hideous because we're darker. And that's still a struggle in some countries and just among different individuals. That's still an issue. Colorism is an issue. Loving your natural hair is still an issue for some people. And again, we have come a very long way. But we have to be able to acknowledge the root of this thing so we can uproot it. I never thought to pray against internalized racism. So that's the work that we have to do. Now, how can God redeem this? This resource provides a lot of solutions. A few in particular I want to focus on. Define the work for your own community. What dimensions of internalized racism and cross-racial hostility need to be addressed? Let's be real. Those of us who have family from the continent, what do we need to work on? Black people in this country, what do we need to work on? Latinos, what do we need to work on? Asians even, what do we need to work on? Have we internalized racism? There are so many ways that this is expressed. I cannot express to you more how necessary it is to read this article because there's too many examples, there's too many dimensions to this for me to even cover in this sit down right here. But ultimately, what I will encourage for you and I to do is to caregive. It's different than caretaking. We're not taking over someone else's, and in this case with racial, with anti-racist work, we're not taking over. We're not going to take over and teach you and to make sure that you have everything that you need, like spoon feeding you all the way through on this issue. But what we will do is we will support you as you are on your way through this journey, learning your own self and these structures being broken down bit by bit. And they encourage for groups to be made between white people and people of color and Black people. Because if we're going to be doing, again, this anti-racism work, white people have their job, Black people and people of color have our job. And so by working together and being kind to one another and supporting one another through this process, we're going to be able to come together and move forward in this fight against dismantling racism in our nation. Look, when you do click on that resource, when you go all the way to the end of it, at the end there are reflection questions. And they are really good. They're really thorough. They'll really make you think. I had to stop and expect this to take some time with these questions, and it will only bless you. Question of the day: what are your thoughts on internalized racism? And what work do you believe needs to be done in your community? I'm curious to know your answers. Please let me know that in the comment section below. And also, if you would like for there to be a place where we can even have these kind of conversations, please let us just know, because my Facebook page has been laying dormant for a while. but I will resurrect that thing if you so say the word. If you like this video, be sure to like it and share with those who will be blessed and benefit. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and ring the notification bell so that you will be notified the next video. It's been a pleasure, guys. Love ya. See you later. Peace out.